Okay. All right. So I just want to introduce Cathy. Well, actually, I'm going to let Cathy introduce herself.
Hey everybody, my name is Cathy Torres. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm the organizing manager with Frontera Fund. We're an abortion fund here in the Valley. We just to talk a little bit about our organization, we help people pay for their abortions. So if they are in the RGV or based in the RGV, or are from the RGV leaving to get their care, we can help them out. We recently expanded to serve all of the entire border from Brownsville to El Paso. And we are also serving all undocumented people throughout the state of Texas. We provide both financial support for their abortions directly and also practical support, which means travel, lodging, if they need childcare stipends, food. So you can imagine how busy we've been with SB8, which we'll talk a little bit about. But that's who we are. We are small. We were formed in 2015, but we have two staff. I'm one of them, four board members, and that is who makes up our group. But we work very closely with abortion funds throughout the whole state of Texas and other really great groups, even here in the Valley, that I'll be happy to share about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Cathy. Right now we're going to jump right into today's questions that we have for Cathy. And the first one is, what brought you into the repro justice world?
Yeah, thanks. I really like that question because I feel like everyone's I don't know, maybe it's just me because I'm in the thick of it, but I feel like a lot of people may remember the first time we ever had a conversation about abortion. And my first encounter, I'll never forget, was when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school. I went to Med High. I don't know if folks have heard of those schools. I went to Med High, so I had to take the bus every day back to Edinburgh because that's where I lived. And I had classmates that were just like, out of nowhere, like, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And I was like, to me, it was a no-brainer. I didn't think there was even a disagreement. So I was like, I mean, I don't think anyone should tell anyone what to do. So I guess I'm pro-choice. And they were like, just so shook that I had this stance. And they're like, how could you think of the baby? Think of all the anti, stuff that you hear, throughout the news cycles and things like that. Um, and it turns out that it was the time at this age, if you're Catholic, you're going through the process of your confirmation through the Catholic Church. So I know I was going through that process too. And so they had to go and volunteer with their church. And I think they were doing some stuff. I don't know what they were doing, but that was their big introduction to abortion. Was they were sucked into their church's work and stuff around being pro-life. And I don't know, it was just interesting how I'll never forget that day. It was just in the bus and I was 14. And my stance never really changed from there. I think I just got more radical. So in 2014, when I went to college, I led the Progressive Young Democrats at UTRGV that was founded by my dear friend who actually passed away last year, Mimosa Thomas. She was really, really great. She really opened my eyes to progressive issues and social justice movements, including the abortion rights movement. So I've always supported abortion access. Like I said, like I naively thought that like being pro-choice was a no-brainer. Like I even like thought that there was no opposition. So it was then when I learned about abortion restrictions and saw how they impacted people even very close to me. And I just felt compelled to do something about it. So pretty much since then, since 2014, I committed to learning more and more about abortion access, and then even dug even further into the reproductive justice movement, which we'll for sure talk about. So in my education and around reproductive justice, like going beyond reproductive rights, which is just abortion should be legal, kind of like going beyond that framework. My political praxis did move like further left, but my journey through like political education had to start from somewhere, right? And that was the Young Democrats on campus. So that's why I always tell like my younger cousins or family friends or anyone like that, that getting involved, in school or in the community is so important, because you just never know where it's going to take you in life.
Yeah, I definitely have a similar experience to that. Like thinking like so naive, like, yeah, we're all like pro-choice. Like, why wouldn't everybody want, that for people with uterus? But yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Cathy. So my next question is, why are abortion rights connected to immigration justice?
Yeah. So it's important that we address like social justice movements with a reproductive justice lens. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So that basically means that we need to understand that how people navigate society impacts how people are able to raise and support their families. So reproductive justice was a term coined by the largest national multi-ethnic RJ collective called Sister Song in the early 90s. I believe it was 1994. That combined ideas between social justice and reproductive rights. So many people of color, predominantly Black women, recognized that women's rights movements at the time, which were led by middle class, wealthy white women, did not speak to the needs of women of color and other marginalized people, women and trans people of color and other marginalized groups. So, therefore, the reproductive justice framework was born. So, specifically immigrant justice. So immigrant justice is a reproductive justice issue. So people who are undocumented in general, like generally speaking, are navigating a super hyper militarized world that's set up to criminalize them for simply having a different citizenship status, speaking a different language, having a different skin color, or to put it, bluntly, not fitting into a specific checkbox that's appealing to white supremacy. And because society is actively working against undocumented people, it instills a constant struggle to raise families, plan families, and even provide for their communities. Because, our families are often chosen family. So that's why immigrant justice is a reproductive justice issue. If you are an immigrant who is pregnant, and you're facing all of these different things, it's not easy for you to just end a pregnancy or get pregnant or raise a family because of all of these fears that a person who may be a citizen or who is white may not experience. So the big talk is SB8, right? Which we'll touch on, but there's always been anti-abortion laws in Texas that have made accessing abortion care for undocumented people nearly impossible, which is why we're so blessed to have a clinic in McAllen where we have a large undocumented population. But now, on top of all those laws, we have now SB8, and which makes abortion access for immigrants way more obsolete, frankly, impossible. So as folks may be aware, and there'll be room for questions after, so I can elaborate on SB8 if need be, but SB8 has banned abortion, frankly, when there's a fetal cardiac rhythm or when it's detected, or maybe it's between like 6 weeks is what we've been hearing, but it can range between like 5 to 6 weeks. So meaning if you're anywhere past that, you must leave the state of Texas to obtain an abortion. And being from the Valley, if you are from the Valley, we know that 60 to 100 miles north of any port of entry, we have Border Patrol checkpoints, Falfurrias, Sarita, Hebronville, anywhere there's a main highway, basically. So how can an undocumented person who is pregnant and does not want to leave the state to get an abortion when they risk deportation just by driving a few miles north? It's just, how can you ask someone to do that? But that's the reality. Undocumented people who are pregnant are literally left with no choice. They're either facing deportation or being forced into parenthood. So that's just one reason out of many that abortion bans like SB8 and in general are racist and anti-immigrant. Like abortion bans in general are racist and anti-immigrant because they're purposely created to keep low-income people of color, undocumented people from accessing something that they have the inherent right to. And that's fully one example. I'm sure we can come up with many that shows that immigrant justice is a reproductive justice issue.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some sort of intersectionality between these. And thank you for highlighting the fact that immigrant justice is a reproductive justice issue, because we really can't talk about like, you know, one topic without the other, and like understanding that these are super intertwined. So that leads me to my next question. What are ways that we can all help provide resources like proper sex education, condoms, and clinics to our community?
Definitely. Sergio, can you pull up those graphics? There you go. Awesome. So I put these together to sort of show the different reproductive health organizations in the RGV. There's also advocacy ones out there, but these are the ones that will help with like services directly. You can definitely screen grab this, take a picture of it, because if I talked about it all, I would run out of saliva. But Valley AIDS Council, Access Clinics, Planned Parenthoods in Cameron County, South Texas Reproductive Justice, us, Frontera Fund, and then Whole Women's Health. Those are the different reproductive health orgs in the Valley. If you know of others, definitely put it in the chat. But definitely getting in contact and getting to know and maybe even volunteering for these groups is a good way to become well-versed, so that way you can bring, you know, that information back to your families and your peers. Access Esperanza also has a sex ed program. So they do a lot of peer education there with students at UTRGV. I used to work at Access, so I can definitely answer any of those questions. Valley AIDS Council has a lot of preventative services, preventative care. What's great about them is you can also sign up to be a condom distribution site. So like if you are in an organization that would just love to pass condoms out to your community, you can sign up with them. I used to work at Valley AIDS too, so I can provide more info on that. But ultimately, one of the best ways that you can help is to talk to your family and friends about these topics. So talking unapologetically about things like abortion, safe sex practices, letting them know that groups like Frontera Fund and other groups exist really helps break the stigmas around these topics and makes it a reality for a lot of people. So it's not just that like, oh, people down here don't support it, or, oh, it's very like, it is taboo, right? But it's culturally inappropriate, sort of these stigmas that we hold within ourselves. It's just simply not, you know, true. It's just that people just may not be informed about it, and it's not their fault, right? So, you know, be the change, as cliche as it is, but be the change. Talk to your friends and your peers about these things, because it really does work.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. We are going to be sharing these after, so don't worry if you want a copy of these, that those will be sent in a separate email after the meeting. So for the next question is, how can we support someone who is going through an abortion?
Yeah, great question. I say no matter what, be there for them. Everyone's abortion experience is different. Just make sure they know that they're not alone, and however they're feeling, physically, emotionally, is 100% valid. So typically when someone has an abortion, they'll experience cramping and bleeding. It's sort of like a really, really heavy, uncomfortable period for, I mean, about a week or so. So it's good to be stocked up, you know, have pads, have a heating pad, ibuprofen, super, super helpful. And even like chocolate, green tea, silly, cheesy, romantic comedies, like 27 Dresses or Mean Girls, that's my favorite. Having those around, just making the setting comfortable and safe is really, really helpful. And that's all really people need, just knowing that they're not alone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of people like who go through an abortion, yeah, like how you said, like I didn't know that it took like almost like a week, and like it took a lot of aftercare and things like that. So thank you for sharing that as well. The last question, we kind of are repeating this, but are there any resources that you would like to share, or just anything else that you would like to say that we haven't asked you?
Yeah, of course. So true. I'll definitely getting in touch with all those organizations more deeply. But other than that, if anyone reaches out to you seeking abortion care, both in and out of Texas, they can actually go to needabortion.org. And there they'll find a directory of different clinics, different abortion funds, and other really useful information about SB8, because that's everyone's like sort of question right now. Like, what am I going to do if I'm past 6 weeks, or I've met the time, here in Texas, what am I to do? And needabortion.org is really, really good about keeping that updated. And then our social media, Frontera Fund, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So just keeping in tune with our social media platforms as well. We try to keep our followers up to date with SB8 news, since we're involved with those lawsuits. We're pretty informed about SB8. So definitely keeping in track with that. And, I like to think we're pretty fun to follow. We're in tune with the memes and what's hip and everything. So yeah, follow our social medias. All those groups that I sent, they all also have social media platforms. And yeah, those are the resources that I can share for now. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And again, like we said, we just dropped the needabortion.org in the chat in case y'all want to check that out. And then again, we will be sharing these resources after this meeting. But thank you so much, Cathy, for sharing all of your knowledge and everything, and just being here today, to talk about, abortion rights and immigration justice.